Welcome to our talk this evening on artificial hormones, contraception and HRT. This was a wonderful presentation to put together. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
I'm super excited about doing this because I've been doing a load of menopause talks in the last 6 months, and it has come to my attention that women really don't know what the options are. And actually, I didn't know that there were even options when I was navigating the minefield that is HRT. And it was genuinely a conversation with someone at the gym that actually led me down the path that I'm on. And I don't even know where I'd be. So I kind of have this feeling at the moment with talking about menopause. I'm doing loads and loads of talks, like I said, and I'm doing them in the back rooms of pubs that are really smoky. I'm being invited to all of these menopause groups all around sort of South Coast. And I was in a what would you call it, like a village hall the other day, and it's all these women keep on assembling. Like they're like I said, they're all menopause groups. They're all women that are really struggling. And we're sort of in these rooms having these conversations, and there's something about it which kind of breaks my heart, because we're back in a place where women are having to find the education out for themselves. But it also feels like we're on the cusp of this revolution, because women are educating themselves and are empowering themselves. And with all of the stuff that Davina McCall's doing and how so much is starting to come into mainstream media, we are on the brink of this revolution. And I am really hoping actually that seminars like this are completely redundant by the time my daughter is going through menopause, because this should be standard education. We should know what the options are. That's my slight rant. Apart from I want to start off by saying we still have a really big battle ahead of us when it comes to menopause and women being treated effectively. And even some of the things we're going to talk about today, the kind of education that we are delivering, that you are receiving, that you are going to be able to give to your clients. You know, my clients take this information to GPs, and it still can be a battle. And we can talk about that a little bit later. And I find that women they get the information and then they don't know what to do with it, and they go into their doctors and they're saying, look, I think this is the thing that I want to be given, and then they're still being bamboozled. And so our job really is to empower them to know what decisions that they want to make, to know that they can make those decisions, that legally they have a right to make those decisions, and then be able to hold their hands whilst they go through this process. And I just want to say that I found out last week after a stand-up row with a GP that, and I quote, hormone blood tests are no longer being offered to women over the age of 45. And HRT is not going to be given to women until they're over 50. So there is now a 5-year period where women are going to be completely unsupported when it comes to their hormones, in arguably the most important 5 years of her hormonal lifetime. Now, that has not happened by accident. It will be because of cost. And so it is even more important that we know this information and we can help people to spot their symptoms and actually go and make the demands. Because the good thing is, on the back of this, that if they are sort of really, really struggling with symptoms and they're empowered to know this information, then there is actually a chance that they can get the HRT that they need, or the support. If they decide not to go down that road, they could get the support that they're looking for, be it with herbal or whatever.
Fantastic. The presentation that we're going to go through is split roughly into 2 parts. We are going to be looking at contraception and the pill, and things like the coil, etc., so from a contraception point of view, and then we're going to look at menopause. So I'm going to just share my screen. Here we go. You see that?
I can see it.
Wonderful. So artificial hormones, contraceptives and HRT with you and me.
So for those of you who don't know us, I'm Claire Snowden, darling.
I'm Laura Knowles. And to be fair, this is absolutely your baby when it comes to when we look at our business. The digestive, immune stuff is more my baby. This is absolutely yours. So I'm really looking forward to this.
It's just basically what we've been through on our hormonal journey, on our health journey, isn't it?
Exactly.
Well, I'm going to be prattling a lot later, so you do the first bits.
Okay, so welcome to the College of Functional Wellness. For those of you who are unfamiliar with us, this lesson that we're giving is part of our diploma training. Our kinesiology practitioners and our wellness practitioners get access to this as part of their training. We specialize in kinesiology, wellness, nutrition, and emotional coaching. And all of the work that we do is from research, our clinical experience. We've both been in clinic for nearly 15 years now, and we've both been let down by the medical and the holistic model. So it's been an interesting process of developing this work, and our unique piece of work is the triangle of hormonal health. But we also have a very different way of looking at the pathway that someone goes through when they come and see a practitioner. And our specialities are blood sugars, stress, adrenals, hormones, digestion, immune and emotional transformation. And we do these lessons each month and across those different topics. And what is so interesting about what we do is how much those 6 pillars all fit together like a jigsaw puzzle.
Yes, they sound completely separate, but they're really not.
They're really, really not.
Okay, so you do this bit. Because I know I'm gonna like.
That's okay. You're doing the medical stuff.
You do this bit.
The hormone stuff. Okay, so we wanted to start by talking you through what a healthy female cycle is, because there's a lot of women who don't experience this, and it's good to understand how these different hormones work in our body. So we start off on week 1 after our bleed. And you can see the estrogen, which is the red line, starts to increase up until week 2. Now, all our hormones are pretty low in week 1 and 2. And as we come up to ovulation, which is in between week 2 and week 3, we get a spike in estrogen, which is when estrogen is at its highest. And we get a spike in testosterone. So it's not many people who understand, who really know about their periods, know that we get that kick of testosterone. And that kick of testosterone at ovulation is so that we feel all sexy to make a baby. That's what testosterone is doing. After we've ovulated, estrogen drops off and progesterone comes in line. And progesterone is really known for holding the baby, holding the pregnancy, if there is a pregnancy that has happened. And I think this is something that can be a very traditional view of progesterone, that it is just for holding the baby. And actually progesterone is such an important hormone, and I'm really hoping that you're going to have that as a takeaway from this presentation of how important progesterone is for us. As women, we produce it all the way through our lives, and we need it. We don't just need it for the baby, if there is a baby. And then you can see estrogen picks up again in week 3. And then at the end of week 4, the whole thing gets cleared out as we have our period. So estrogen is a stimulator. It's a stimulating hormone. Its main role is in that ovulation, but it also plays a role in our metabolism, how energetic we feel, in our libidos, in our mood. It's a heart protector. It's also an insulin regulator. So this is an introduction to our triangle of hormonal health. And
so just to say that if they're out of balance, they do the opposite of those things. Like this is when they're in balance.
Absolutely, this is what they're for. So when we don't have the right levels of estrogen, we have a terrible metabolism. We're not ovulating. We've got low energy. We've got low libido. We've got a terrible mood. So absolutely, as Claire said, this is how the healthy female cycle should look. And progesterone, on the flip side, estrogen and progesterone work together like a lovely couple. And progesterone is our calmer. It, like I said, it holds the pregnancy, it's for fertility, it's a cycle regulator. Again, it plays a role in mood. It plays a role in bloating. So people who have issues with progesterone, low progesterone, often, or high progesterone, complain of bloating. This is where you see the digestive piece fitting into hormones. Sleep goes off, hair, skin, nails all go off. Period regulator, it's for bones and muscles, and it reduces inflammation because it's that calmer. Estrogen stimulates inflammation and the immune response. Progesterone calms it. There's some really interesting studies that are coming out about how progesterone can effectively calm autoimmune conditions, which I am deeply, deeply excited about. That's my baby. And then we have testosterone. Testosterone is for feeling jiggy with it. It's giving us energy, hair, bone health, again, breast health, fertility, menstrual and vaginal health. So you can see how important these hormones are in giving us all of this lovely stuff, and they are so often out of balance. Go.
So we have 3 different types of estrogen, and they are produced at different phases in women's lives. So we have estradiol, often spelt without the O, but we're in England, so we're going to spell it with the O. This is predominantly the estrogen that is in women of childbearing age, mostly produced by the ovaries. Now, estradiol is a very active form of estrogen. So if you think when you've got to run around after a toddler, you need some energy. So that is the estradiol. Estriol is the main estrogen produced during pregnancy, mostly in the placenta, and it's more of a calm version of estrogen. I talk about them really graphically because I've been going through the menopause. I've had both. We're going to talk about that later, but I've had both. And estradiol, when you actually have just estradiol, it's quite there's a rawness to it, and estriol is a little bit more estriol, and then I have to pronounce them. It's quite calming. But not like progesterone. I just mean it's less stimulating. And estrone is produced by the adrenal glands and fatty tissue, and is the only type of estrogen produced after menopause. Now, that is going to become very, very important later. Pin that for later. It's a very active form of estrogen. So it's not going to be stimulating, and it's not going to basically give you fertility. It's just enough to give you some of the background things that Laura was talking about.
Can you just say that again? I think it cut out. It could have been my internet. I'm about to go through a storm. Can you say that again?
Oh, yes. I was looking at my internet. I think it's fine. So it's, I can't remember what I said now because I've got menopause. Like, I've got the menopause. So it is, what was I saying? So it's a very, very inactive form of estrogen. So it's not going to, it's only going to give you some of the background bits that Laura was talking about in that previous slide. So it's not particularly stimulating. It's not, it's quite inactive.
Okay, so we're going to start off with contraception before we go into the menopause and HRT. So why do women take contraceptives? Well, mainly it is to do with preventing a pregnancy. But what we are seeing more and more and more is that women are taking contraceptives to reduce their hormonal symptoms. And I think one of the things that frustrates me, angers me even, is that the contraceptives are often recommended for their health benefits, including preventing cysts, acne, heavy bleeds, PCOS. I mean, you can see the list there. And I think that this is really challenging because, as you're going to see from this presentation, there aren't any real health benefits. Yes, you can get the symptoms lessen, let's say that, but the knock-on effect of what's happening with our bodies, because of the list that we've gone through of why we need estrogen, why we need progesterone, why we need testosterone, you are stopping your body by taking contraceptives. And so yes, your symptoms may ease, but there is this knock-on effect.
And it's a sticking plaster because you're not actually dealing with what caused them in the first place. So it is incredibly common that I am getting 14-year-old girls, 15-year-old girls who started their bleeds. They're very, very heavy bleeds. They're painful. It's disrupting their school life. And the first thing the GP does is put them on the pill, not actually looking at why are those bleeds heavy in the first place. And that is very much what we're going to cover in this.
And I think that is a wonderful way of how we work, is when there are symptoms or issues in the body, our first go-to is to ask the question why. And I don't think that this is necessarily the traditional model, which is there's symptoms, how do we get rid? It's coming at it from a different angle. So the pill, 3.1 million women in the UK take the pill. And what I think is interesting, which we're going to discuss later, is that that 7-day break is unnecessary, but I think it's to help women feel like they're having a bleed. There's absolutely no point into having that bleed. And the progestin only is taken continuously, so there is no bleed. And it is
that's the mini pill, right? So you've got the combined pill and the mini pill. Yeah,
that's the mini pill. And the combined oral contraceptive pill is ethanol, estradiol, and progestin. And this is important, that it is progestin, not progesterone, and we will cover that more in a moment. We also have the implant and the injection, progestogen, which is a synthetic form of progesterone. 3 years for the implant, 8 to 13 weeks for the injection, and periods often stop. We have the coil, which is again progestogen, which again is the synthetic form of progesterone and is a 3 to 5 years duration. Now, this is what is known as the Mirena coil.
Or the Kyleena, or yeah, there's a few. There
are other brand names. This is not the traditional copper coil, which doesn't have any hormones in it. Understanding the endocrine.
So I just want to actually say, before we go on to that, that one of the things that women are told about the Mirena or Kyleena coil, one of the spiels, and I've heard it myself, is it's a very low dose of progesterone and it's localized. And I might be being really naive, but it gets into the bloodstream. It's not localized. That is not a localized hormone. I don't even understand how your hormones can be localized. So something is rotten in Denmark in the way that we are describing this to women. And I personally see a huge amount of hormonal fallout when women when they're using the coil, that change after they stop. So very often women are being given the coil to stop heavy bleeds, and it's not stopping the heavy bleeds. These devices actually cost the NHS an extortionate amount of money, but they are one of the medication routes that GP surgeries are financially incentivized to get women onto. So that's something that I think is really important information, because it is very common when I've had one of these coils in that they say they felt highly pressured to have it. And it's because the surgery is financially incentivized to get a certain amount of people on with the coil. Now, and then they're expensive bits of kit. So when women are actually going and saying, I want to have that taken out, I actually experienced this as well, but then quite often you get quite short shrift when you want to have it removed because it's expensive kit. So I don't believe it is localized, because the symptoms that women are having are very much affecting their whole body, and those symptoms change. And I do say to women, when they're thinking of changing the Mirena coil, and sometimes it takes women a really long time to get the courage to do that, because it's a really big decision to make, especially if they had things like heavy bleeds. But when the Mirena coil is not there and we're dealing with the heavy bleeds, now we can actually deal with the root cause. Now we can actually look at what is causing those bleeds, those heavy bleeds. How can we fix that moving forwards? And actually that will come into, ironically, when we talk about hormones later, bioidentical hormones later. you do this beautifully.
Oh, thanks. We talk about this a lot. And the reason that we've included this in this presentation is we want to describe what's happening in the endocrine system from the lens of looking at artificial hormones. So when we understand that the endocrine system is this beautiful part of our body that works as a family, all works together. We've got all these different glands that go through the body, and the hypothalamus at the top is our nervous system. It's our responses to what is happening in our environment, which communicates with the pituitary gland, and the pituitary gland is sending out messages throughout the endocrine system to be producing the hormones to keep us in homeostasis. So, for example, the thyroid gland gets the messages about it. There's a link with the thyroid gland and the ovaries that says, okay, it's time for periods, for example. Thyroid gland is also responsible for our metabolism, our temperature, our what weight we are, hot and cold. The thymus is part of our immune system. The pancreas is to do with blood sugars, but is also digestive. It's 95% of its role is digestive. We've got the adrenal glands, which produce our adrenaline and cortisol to get this, which produces our stress response. And then we've got the testes and the ovaries. So what happens is that this, what I love talking women through this is when we have a list of different symptoms. And often women are going, I just don't know where all of these are coming from. And when we start to look at it through the endocrine, we can see, oh, okay, there's something going on in the endocrine. Because what happens is if one of these glands goes down, it has a knock-on effect with the other glands. So if we have constant stress in our adrenal glands, and the hypothalamus and the pituitary are trying to produce that adrenaline and cortisol, we are going to start to see a knock-on effect with our thyroid. So we might start putting on weight, or our thymus, so we start getting colds, or our pancreas, so our digestion goes off, or our ovaries and testes, so our sex drive or our periods start to go off. And it can be coming from stress. So we need to be looking at, and when we put something like artificial hormones into the body, you are overriding the pituitary gland, you are overriding the ovaries. And so that is two major players in the endocrine. What do we think is going to happen to the thyroid, to the thymus, to the pancreas, to our nervous systems? It's to our adrenals if we've got two of our major glands that are being overridden.
So actually talking about the pituitary gland, it is common for women when they stop taking the pill to not ever get their bleeds back. So they actually go into a type of an early menopause, and that's actually called, what's it called? Forgotten. I have to think about the words, primary pituitary failure. And they'll just never get their periods back. And the GP will say, oh, that sometimes happens, but it actually happens commonly. And I don't know of any woman who is sat in a GP surgery signing a disclaimer where she understands that this could happen. And I actually saw a woman who came off the pill. She'd been on the pill for 3 years. She came off the pill 5 years ago and has never got any of her bleeds back, and has actually had some scans, and they said that her pituitary gland has been damaged from it. So I think we're starting to really play with fire if we're giving this to 14 and 15-year-old girls.
Mm-hmm.
So as Laura was explaining, we have the information that comes from our senses through the hypothalamus and through our hormones to our pituitary gland. And the hypothalamus and pituitary will decide whether or not we are in danger. So is there anything that we need to react to as humans? And if so, if we're in danger, so it might be, okay, well, your blood sugars have dropped too low, you're really, really hungry, you need to go and get food. That's a hormonal response that's picked up by the pituitary. Or the hypothalamus, through our eyes, will see that there is a train coming towards us. Okay, we need to move out of the way. Now, to do those sort of quick, movement things, our body produces cortisol, our stress hormone, and cortisol's job is to put sugar into our muscles and into our bloodstream to get us out of danger. And when the body produces cortisol, so they tell the hypothalamus and the anterior pituitary send a message to the adrenals And this is called the H for hypothalamus, P for pituitary, A for adrenal axis conversation. So they tell the adrenals to make cortisol. And when the adrenals have made cortisol, they send this little red letter back to the pituitary and the hypothalamus saying, I've done it, I've put the cortisol into the system, so stop sending me the message, stop making the request. But that was in response to something that happened 20 minutes ago. And so now there's another message that's happened. It's like an email's popped in, or the kids are arguing, or something's happening. And so now what's happening is I've got this other message and another message and another message, or I'm eating food I'm intolerant to, or I'm anything that happens. Today we are living in a stress soup, like fully living in a stress soup. And so after a while, the red letter gets switched off. And so there is one message coming: make cortisol. And this is what we call an HPA axis dysregulation. And this is fundamentally what we are seeing in clinic all the time. It is an HPA axis dysregulation that is the root cause of all chronic conditions, because when we have too much cortisol being pumped out in the body, we will have inflammation in the body, and inflammation is the root cause of all chronic conditions. So we're going to just do a little dive into why synthetic progestins are a problem. Now, again, this is going to be one to pin for later as well. And there is a reason why it has come after the HPA axis, because if you remember, progesterone is calming and it actually reduces inflammation. So cortisol causes inflammation. Progesterone, it's like literally the antithesis. So progesterone is so super important. Synthetic progesterones, however, do not act the same way as progesterone. So if you actually look at this nerdy bit of biochemistry here, we've got levonorgestrel. That is the technical name for synthetic progestins. So progestin is an umbrella term for these chemicals. Well, when you look at it, levonorgestrel, it's more like testosterone. It doesn't look like progesterone. Now that's important, because if we refer back to Laura talking about the female hormones, testosterone was a ramp you up hormone, estrogen, a ramp you up hormone. Progesterone is a calm you down hormone. So if I don't have actual progesterone in my body, and now I've got something which is a synthetic, which is also going to be a ramp me up hormone, I've got no capability of calming down whatsoever. So progesterone, beneficial for cardiovascular health, stimulates hair growth, calms mood and promotes sleep, prevents breast cancer. That sounds important. Progestin actually increases the risk of fatal blood clots, can cause hair loss due to its similarity to testosterone, may cause anxiety and depression because it's ramping up. There's no calm here. And an idea of what life is like without progesterone, it's actually women who have PMDD, the dysmorphia, where they literally feel like they're going crazy and are smashing plates and, you know, trying not to stab people. Like, they are really struggling, and they're put on anti-anxiety medication, antidepressants, antipsychotics, you name it, they are put on them. And it also increases the risk of breast cancer. So life without real progesterone is not good for women. And so adding in these progestins is horrendous for our health.
So a pill bleed is not a bleed. I think it's really important to understand that a pill does not regulate periods, it suppresses them. And I think that the message that we get when when a woman is not bleeding regularly or is having heavy bleeds is told, we can regulate your period by going on the pill. That's not what's happening. Your periods are being suppressed by the pill or a contraceptive. It's the others as well. A real period, a real cycle has to have the ovulation on week 2, at the end of week 2. it also needs to have that luteal phase. So we showed that graph at the beginning. You need to have that 2-week post ovulation with the progesterone climbing. What's happening when a woman is taking the pill and then having a 7-day break? She's having a withdrawal bleed, which is mimicking a menstrual cycle. What I think is interesting is that in a blood test, a woman on the pill has estrogen and progesterone levels at menopausal levels, because of the artificial hormones are not hormones.
And so this is where it damages the pituitary. And this is where we are seeing women crying out for natural progesterone rather than these synthetic progestins. So again, we have to figure out why are those symptoms happening that they're being put on the pill for, if that's why they've gone on the pill, and fix them at the root cause, not be suppressing what's going on because, oh yes, well, we fixed it because now you're having a regular bleed. It's not a bleed. And what we'll see later on is, yeah, women are having, they're starting to have all the things that are associated with lack of estrogen and lack of progesterone.
So how we work in clinic is that we do have this conversation with people who are on the pill about the benefits of our natural hormones and what is happening in the body. And so if we have a client who is interested in coming off the pill or coming off of contraceptives, then we tend to work with them for, it's a sort of 3-month period for most to be able to regulate the hormones again, 3 to 6 months, I would say. And what we look at doing is we need to support the gut, because there has been a gut imbalance, particularly if they're taking the oral pill, because you are changing the gut environment by putting artificial hormones through the digestion. So we do support the gut by eliminating food intolerances, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. We also look at some adaptogens. Vitex Chastity Tree is a great one for promoting progesterone and helping balance out hormones. And we look at, there's 3 different technical supplements that we use in our clinics: NAC, DIM, and calcium diglucarate, which are all there designed to support the liver. So the liver has about 300 jobs in the body: digestion and bile and fats and hormones. But why we take supplementation for the liver with regards to coming off the pill is if there has been artificial hormones in the system, it is the liver's job to detox them out. And so taking a liver detoxing supplement will help clear any residues out and help improve the liver function to be able to rid the body of artificial hormones. So if you've got a woman who's coming off the pill and they're having a bit of a wobbly time of it, we would be looking at these 3 key areas.
So, the triangle of hormonal health. The reason why all of this is, the reason why we are so keen on dealing with the root cause is because of this clinic model that we have put together called the Triangle of Hormonal Health. And basically the purpose of the purpose of the triangle is to explain a interaction between 3 sets of hormones. And these 3 sets of hormones are our sex hormones, which we're talking about today, our stress hormones, and our blood sugar hormones. Now, I want you to imagine a stool, and we need all the legs of our stool to be nice and even. As soon as we've got a leg that's out of balance, our stool's going to be wobbly. And if we've got a couple that are out of balance, our stool's going to fall over. Now, interestingly, we're talking about issues with sex hormones today because we're talking about things like, PCOS and those things. But actually, the first victims that we see when we've got some wobbly legs are the immune system and or the digestive system, one or both. They tend to be where things manifest first. So it's quite well established now that things like irritable bowel syndrome is considered, is quite a precursor to people getting autoimmune diseases. Now, it's also interesting that most people who suffer from autoimmune disease are female. So there is this huge connection between estrogen, progesterone, and like Laura was saying, the fact that progesterone is calming for things like autoimmune. So what we're looking to do, if someone has got these issues like PCOS, endometriosis, we're going, okay, right, well, rather than suppress what's going on over here, how can we fix up what's going on over here? How can we navigate balancing those stress hormones more? How can we deal with those blood sugars with diet, with supplementation, by reducing stress, because cortisol is a really big one for blood sugar destabilization. And that way we actually are dealing with the root cause. We don't have to suppress, and we're not creating victims in the immune system and digestive system, because the reports, what women report when they come off of the pill is, my digestion's better. Obviously, weight is a huge issue on the pill, and I just don't feel foggy anymore. So what we're doing to our body by taking it is quite astonishing. I keep saying the pill, but I mean contraceptives as hormonal contraceptives as a general broad thing.
So when we're in the clinic, when we are supporting female health, these are all the different elements that we are looking at. Eliminating food intolerances. The lesson that we did last month was on food intolerances. So if you're interested in that or haven't seen it, then we've got that as a recording. Food intolerances is huge. It's a huge part of what we do. And we look at just clearing out the foods that are causing inflammation, and we're looking at putting the foods in that are going to add in nutritional density. We are always looking at balancing blood sugars. It's one of the fastest things that we can do, because we can change our blood sugars by what we're putting in our mouth on the next meal. So yes, blood sugar regulation can take a little bit of time, but we can start to work with it as soon with the next meal. So and it like Claire was saying, it's an important part of the triangle. So we need to get those blood sugars balanced, and we need to reduce stress. We are looking at supporting healthy hormone production, always getting those 3 legs of the stool balanced if we are going to feel healthy. We are often looking at eliminating toxic load, and we see that contraceptives, artificial hormones, play a role in that toxic load, but also the cosmetics that we have in our environment, the cleaning products, that are all xenoestrogens in our environment, which we'll talk a little bit more about soon, that are adding to this hormone picture. We want to be improving digestion. We want to be making sure that someone is exercising correctly. So we see it through this hormone lens, that if someone is exercising, doing a lot of cardio after work, last thing at night, we are producing stress hormones at the wrong end of the day. So this is going to affect our sleep. This is going to affect our hormones. It's going to affect the triangle. And we are looking at getting sleep as good as possible. So this is when someone comes off the pill, or if we've got a woman coming into our clinic, these are all the areas that we look at from a coaching perspective, from a supplement perspective, and from a diet perspective, from a artificial hormone perspective. Now, if we have a woman who is on the pill, and this is why we have this conversation on the first session about the reasons that they are on the pill, and we understand that some women decide that they want to stay on the pill, that it is the option for them. It reduces what we can work on to bring that body into balance. We can still work with the food intolerances and with the diet, with nutritional density. We can eliminate the toxic load as much as we can, looking at things like cosmetics and our cleaning products. And we can look at balancing exercise. However, we find it much more challenging to be working with the blood sugars, because of this interplay between when we are overriding our estrogen and our progesterone and our testosterone. It is much harder to balance blood sugars because of this relationship with what Claire was talking about with the triangle. We cannot support healthy hormone production because there are artificial hormones going in. We find dealing with stress much harder, because progestin is a stimulator, estrogen is a stimulator, testosterone is a stimulator. So there are no calm calming hormones in the body. So from a chemical perspective, reducing stress is a lot harder. And improving digestion. Like I said, if we are constantly taking an oral contraceptive, we are affecting our digestion. And because estrogen and progesterone play a role in healthy digestion and the whole endocrine system, the pancreas plays a huge role in digestion, and digestion is such a victim if our hormones are out of balance, that it is so much harder to get a digestion working. We can see improvement if we're eliminating food intolerances and we're putting the good stuff in, but it is much, much harder. And we struggle to get that sleep regulated because we've got all the stimulating hormones going in.
So alternatives to the hormonal contraceptives. So the diaphragm, I know, it's not great.
I don't think I know anybody who's ever done the diaphragm, but there we go.
The non-hormonal coil, so the old-fashioned copper coil, which actually only because people go on quite worried about the copper, there's such a tiny amount in it, and actually there's quite a lot of research that shows we don't have enough copper, so it's quite an interesting one. But ultimately, I still think that we can do work on heavy metal toxicity a damn sight easier than we can do work on dealing with those not having progesterone. That is so important for women. So the copper coil, which these days, because the technology of it has been changed, it used to be that you had to have been pregnant, even if it was a miscarried or terminated pregnancy. But these days you don't need to have had a pregnancy because of the new technology. The fertility awareness based method, is that like the withdrawal method? Do you like the fact that I have no clue because I've been dealing with menopause for 8 years? I don't. What are the hip kids calling it these days?
This is where you need quite a lot of self-responsibility, because you're mapping your periods, your temperature using apps.
So yes. Is that the app ones? Right. Yeah. Okay. So it's that. It's called that. Great.
No, it's not withdrawal method.
Is that withdrawal method? That's what the hip kids are calling it. I now know that. See, every day is a school day. I've learned something tonight. The cap, is that different to the diaphragm? No idea. Condom. See, the person who's been dealing with menopause. I don't know. Maybe Laura should have talked you through this slide. Condoms, I know those. I remember those. I remember them from the noughties. That's fantastic. And the hormone-free Fexi gel. Yeah, that's cool. I've heard about that. That is cool. So yeah, there is. And of course,
it's not available in the UK at the moment, but what's interesting is that how it's hormone free is that it is changing the pH balance of the vagina to make it inhospitable for sperm. But from what I've seen, it's incredibly expensive.
Yes, and if it's going to change your pH, it's likely to lead to bacterial vaginosis, which isn't going to be great. And let's just remember, shall we, without having a feminist rant, that they did devise the male pill in 2000 and had amazing clinical trials with it, but nobody wanted to take it up. So here we go again. I know there is still very much a gender bias around contraceptives. So they are our alternatives. So yeah, like I know that there's a lot of app-based things like that, and there's that Daisy, and there is stuff. So I do recommend people go out there and check it out.
It is a challenging conversation to have in the clinic, because we are saying that this is what's happening in the body when we are taking contraceptives, and often we get the question, well, what is the alternative? And we go, well, we recommend.
It's not great.
It's not great. It could be better. Must try harder.
Yeah, let's go back.
So it is a real challenge that women face.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, still.
Right, HRT.
Okay,
that's contraception. Let's go on to HRT.
Okay, so what is the menopause? Okay, so the menopause is the finishing of menstrual periods and fertility. So before the menopause itself, we have a huge period of time called the perimenopause, which can be 10 to 15 years before you actually go through the pause itself. And then after you have stopped periods for a year, then you are considered postmenopausal. So we call it peri to postmenopause, but for general conversation, the whole lot tends to get wrapped up into being called the menopause. So the ovaries stop releasing our eggs, and producing most of their estrogen. But something magical will happen at this time if it's allowed to. I'll tell you that in a moment.
Ooh.
So we have, as you can see, so you remember from the slide that Laura had, you had your estrogen and your progesterone tracking. For simplicity, testosterone's not on here, but ultimately that does decline too. What happens, the first sign of perimenopause is that progesterone falls off a cliff. So let's remember how important our progesterone is. And then we have, so there's always supposed to have a bit more estrogen to progesterone, but when it falls off this cliff, we have this situation where we've got way more estrogen to progesterone. Now that's called estrogen dominance. It's actually a bit of a misnomer. It should be called progesterone deficiency because it puts all the emphasis on estrogen, and in HRT and women's experience, the emphasis is always on estrogen when it really should be on progesterone at this first phase of menopause. So your progesterone has fallen off a cliff. We're in estrogen dominance. Now that is where all the bother happens in perimenopause. I've got too much estrogen. So this is weight gain, it's mood issues, I've got breast tenderness, my periods are all over the place, and I haven't got enough progesterone. I'm not sleeping, I'm having hot flushes, I am literally going to stab people, or I'm crying. Yeah, that's perimenopause. Then during menopause, you can see the estrogen goes all over the show, and then it starts to level out, and it's too has fallen off a cliff, just in a wiggly woggly way. So during menopause, this is why women will bleed every 2 weeks, then nothing for 4 months, and then sometimes nothing for 6 months, and then have another couple of bleeds. That's why that's happening. And during that menopause, as the estrogen is slowly declining, we get different types of hot sweats. So we're going to come on to that. So that's what is going on. And this estrogen dominance is a problem. So I just want to remind you about the HPA axis. So, because here we actually have a situation that as progesterone drops off, progesterone, remember, was the antithesis of cortisol. So even having less progesterone in the body is a stressor to the body. That's also very, very important to remember when we're talking about what Laura said in that slide earlier. Oh, I'm getting excited now. When we're talking about that slide earlier about how in women of childbearing years, where they actually had blood tests done when they're on the pill and they had menopausal amounts of progesterone in the body, that in itself is a stressor on the body. I don't like the word stress, I prefer stressor, which will contribute to the HPA axis. So that is incredibly important. So we have got women who are progesterone deficient, estrogen dominant, and now cortisol dominant. So we are just now in this cycle of inflammation, estrogen, inflammation, estrogen. That is where all of our symptoms come from in peri to post menopause. It's grim. So
I hear you, sister.
Apparently there's light at the end of the tunnel. I'm waiting. It's a bloody long tunnel. Okay, so if you remember, I said at the beginning that the ovaries switch off from making the estradiol. What happens is our adrenal glands are supposed to switch on making estrogen, or they'll make the postmenopausal one, but still it should be enough of a background estrogen for us to have minor symptoms. The thing today is that women are not having minor symptoms. We are having life-affecting symptoms. And it's because we're also damn stressed. And it's because I like to call the generation going through menopause now, a band, it's a big age, but sort of 40 to 60 right now. We're the first group of women who were basically not just told we could have it all, but actively pressured to have it all. And so our adrenal glands have gone through the last 40 years under so much pressure and so much stress. And I love that someone like Davina McCall is the poster woman for this, because she would have been, absolutely what we would have all, been told to aspire to. She's gorgeous and she's highly successful, and she had her children and her, her husband, and she was working out every 5 minutes. I mean, God knows how she functioned with her adrenal glands, because it's all really stressful. So our adrenal glands are going into menopause exhausted. And so this switching on bit is really hard for them to do. So there's a few other bits I want to talk through here. So this is something called the pregnenolone steal, which I think is a bit of a misnomer, because I think it should be called the progesterone steal. So in our adrenal glands, we make, there's a couple of hormones that we make. So firstly, we make adrenaline, which is the signal of the stress signal. Like, it's a neurotransmitter for stress that is part of that conversation that tells us to make cortisol. We also make a hormone called aldosterone, which is really important, because aldosterone deals with blood pressure and fluid retention, and what is one of the biggest medications that women are put on during peri to post menopause: blood pressure regulators. It's nothing to do with your heart unless you actually have a structural heart issue, which is very, very rare. And the other thing that aldosterone does with this fluid retention is how many women are taking fluid tablets because they just feel themselves puffing out. It's aldosterone, and it's because of the adrenal glands, and it's because of the stress. It's because of this cortisol, this signal, this HPA axis dysregulation. So the adrenal glands take cholesterol, aka fat, and we are also the generation of women who grew up with the low fat programming. So we have basically had decades of being scared of fat. Fat really only had a renaissance, what, about 5 years ago, with, I think, well, maybe 10 years ago, with the avocado. Like, that was olive oil and the avocado. That was the renaissance, and coconut oil for fat. Like, everyone went, oh, it's not fat that's the devil, it's those refined carbs. So we've basically gone through, you know, decades of not eating fat, being told to be scared of it. But that is actually how, you know, we take cholesterol from fat in the adrenal glands, and we make a very important hormone called pregnenolone. Now, pregnenolone is an absolute godsend. Pregnenolone basically has a look and works out what hormones are needed. So there is a pathway for it to make progesterone, and there is a pathway for it to make another hormone called DHEA, which is our vitality hormone, loads of energy and anti-aging. Like, we look great when we've got loads of DHEA in our body. And DHEA goes on to make testosterone and estrogen. But, big important but, if we are under stress and there is a stressor in the body will not make progesterone, our calming hormone, because it is not important to hold a baby. It is important to get out of danger. So it will turn it basically makes cortisol instead. And that also then means we have imbalances with testosterone. We have imbalances with DHEA. We're basically progesterone deficient. So this pregnenolone steal is not just important in menopause. This is what the 14-year-old girls are going through with their heavy periods. It's lack of progesterone. This is what they're going through. And so then by giving them, it makes me so angry, by giving them a combined pill, all that estrogen, you know, messing up their gut and all of that progestin, the very presence of progestin will be enough of a stressor to cause this. That's like the most important information that we could give any teenager, any teenage female. That is the most important thing. So the job is always, why are we not making enough progesterone? And that's exactly the list, exactly the same list as the one that Laura told you earlier. Sleep, food intolerances, reducing toxic load, dealing with that stress. So that's the pregnenolone steal, and that's why it's really important that we get our hormone balance right. So the 34, I mean, I don't think they're all here, to be fair. I think this is the 34 top symptoms of menopause.
Yeah.
So these are common symptoms to expect during menopause, and some of them are really weird. Now, these are ones that people really think about as menopause, but the ones that people don't realize are that I think are the ones in early perimenopause, which is usually women maybe 37, 38, who suddenly go, oh, I just don't feel as confident as I once did. Oh, I'm just a little bit more nervous about driving than I was. like really little low things, or my sleep's just not quite right. And or there are the things, or I'm just a bit more anxious. I just notice I'm running lists around my head a little bit more. They're the bits that are missed over and over and over again by doctors. And that is when we need to be going, okay, what do we need to clear out in your life in terms of your stress? What do we need to clear out in terms of food intolerances? And how do we support you with the right diet, with supplements, and in some cases, some bioidentical hormones, which we're going to come on to. Super exciting. So let's just talk hot flushes for a moment. Okay, 2 types of hot flushes. So low progesterone gives you the quick flushes. So some women talk about them coming from the back of their knees, some people say from their ankles, but they whoosh up the body. They're really aggressive, they're fast, they're quite shocking. And what they actually are is, as the progesterone drops off, you get a spike in cortisol. So it's this, it's literally like a jolt of adrenaline, and they come on really, really quickly, and then they are gone within 1 to 2 minutes. And you don't even, it's like you don't know that you've had it. It's gone until the next one, and it's quick and it's sharp, and then it's gone. They're the ones that women are having predominantly in peri to postmenopause, and they can leave you dripping wet. They can. But low estrogen hot flushes, I until I'd experienced both, I couldn't really get a concept of it. They are fascinating because you could literally heat your whole house from them. So low estrogen hot flushes are slow. They are going to go on for about 10 minutes. They radiate from the inside out. And again, women will find they'll go, they start in my back, or they start in my chest or in my tummy. And they radiate and they radiate and they radiate, and you will be able to stand up from the sofa and put your hand on it and it will be hot. So the difference is they don't tend to leave you so sweaty, but you'll just be hot and doing the flappy bit, but you won't be, yes, quite so sweaty. So this is a little bit generic because low estrogen can sometimes look like low progesterone, and low progesterone can look like low estrogen. But in general, low progesterone is a weight gain. It's dropping confidence in everyday activities like driving. It's forgetfulness, an increase in urinating. It's so interesting as well, just going back to the 14-year-old girls who have the heavy periods, so many of them resonate with anxiety. So heavy periods or bad periods, even irregular periods, and anxiety. So it's interesting, isn't it, this connection? This feeling of spinning too many plates, insomnia, being snappy, low libido, and fatigue. Now, low estrogen, we've seen on that chart, low estrogen occurs much later in the menopause journey. It can cause insomnia and weight gain and headaches, but you'll get those differences in the hot flushes. And low estrogen will also usually start to cause things like vaginal dryness and dryness in general. So people get dry eye, dry mouth, total lack of interest in sex, and this grey mood. It's like a lack of enthusiasm or motivation. So low estrogen is like an apathy. Low testosterone, you haven't put that on here, but low testosterone is literally, it's like, you think about really, particularly men with all the testosterone, and they're really motivated, and they're, A-type personalities. That's the testosterone thing. It's like ambition and drive and determination. And low testosterone is, don't care if the business that I've been running for 15 years fails, be fine. Like you have nothing. Whereas low estrogen is it's just all a bit grey, and I'm not really feeling very motivated. I might be able to get excited about something if I've still got testosterone. So why do women take HRT? Well, I don't know if any of that sounded fun, but it's not. And I like to talk a little bit about my auntie Valda, who she died about 10 years ago in her late 80s, and she was a proper 1950s housewife. So she didn't go into menopause with broken adrenal glands like we do today, because her life revolved around, don't get me wrong, the 1950s housewives had their own issues, and they took a lot of Valium, and there was high levels of alcoholism because they were really bored, but they weren't adrenally fatigued. So they would, do some housework, sit down, listen to the radio with a cup of tea, they'd be preparing the evening meal, they'd have a nice, read a magazine before everyone got home from school. I don't know a woman who sits down and listens to the radio with a cup of tea anymore. So HRT, of course, started to become a thing in the 60s and 70s, and it was the research on it was really, really bad. Funny enough, I've just finished reading this chapter in Unwell Women, which is a great book. I strongly recommend. And it wasn't researched very well, and they put far too many hormones in it to begin with, so it was causing a lot of issues. But basically, it's to stop the life-affecting symptoms when they are life-affecting. So back in the day, a lot of women didn't feel they needed it, but they were told to take it because it made them more bearable. True story. So these days, however, we want to take it because we want to get rid of the hot flushes and the night sweats. That's such a biggie, because when you're waking up 6, 7, 8 times in the night and having to change a bed and having to change your, nightie, not fun. Because also, if you've ever had those, you go from the night sweats to the cold sweats, right? So that's horrendous. Reduce sex drive, because, and this is also great about the Davina McCall latest campaign to get testosterone included in HRT, because it's only now being considered that women have a right to a libido post childbearing years. I sound quite cross, don't I? I mean, I am really cross about how women are still dealt with by the medical model through menopause. Vaginal dryness and discomfort during sex, difficulty sleeping. It's basically the 34 symptoms. Bone density reduction, muscle wastage, and artery problems. This is why women take it. And a lot of women are scared of it. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the different options. But actually, the truth is, and one of the things that I'm quite passionate about is, we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. If we don't, we are opening ourselves up to the opportunity for more cancers because of the drop in our hormones. If we do take it, we're opening ourselves up to the opportunity of more cancer. It's which way do we want to go? I mean, I went into early menopause at 39 and I was told I'm taking 15 years off my life because you are more likely to have a stroke because of hardened arteries. Which way do we want to go? So the way I look at it is, okay, how do we navigate it? One of the things that women ask me is, well, when do you come off of it? And I said, well, as soon as you do, you have to go back through a menopause. No one talks through that. That this doesn't stop, it stops the onset of menopause. So at some point, we have to go through menopause. So it's a really challenging one. And I don't think anyone's got all the answers. And ultimately, I think, again, our job as coaches is to support people with the information and help them, guide them and hold their hands through those decisions. So let's talk about them. Okay, so let's talk about HRT, and it was just particularly the medical model one. Did you?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so the medical model. So we've got the combined HRT, so estrogen and again progestin, for women who still have their womb. Okay, that's a really important one. Can you remind me when we get onto the body identicals later about wombs?
Yeah.
Estrogen only HRT for women who have had their womb removed in a hysterectomy. Okay, so again, yeah, that'll come into important in a moment. So we have got
it surprises me that they don't consider progesterone important if you don't have a womb.
Yes, and so we'll come on to that in a moment. Okay. So oral pills and tablets, vaginal creams, pessaries, rings, and transdermals, implants, patches, sprays, and gels. Pretty much the same. So there's 4 types of treatment. There's synthetic, which is mostly what the medical model are going to offer you. There's body identical, there's bioidentical, and there's herbal. Okay, so these were the 4 different pathways that I didn't know existed when I first started on this delightful journey. So let's break it down. Synthetic HRT, actually that's where that slide should go, is the one that I just told you about. It's the pessaries, the blah, 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 that previous slide that I asked Laura if that was the medical model. These are very readily available and becoming more available, because as of this week, you can now self-prescribe them and go and buy them over the counter, but only estrogen. Can relieve symptoms in some women. So some women go, okay, no, like as soon as I went on HRT, it was a game changer. Most women will say, I feel better with it, but I don't feel amazing. And what I like to say to women is, you absolutely deserve to feel amazing. Like, don't settle for better if before that it was rubbish. So body identical HRT is something that you can get from the GP. And it is this box here called Eutrogestin. The pump is not it, but this box here called Eutrogestin. This is a natural progesterone that you get on prescription from the GP. The only downside is it contains soy and peanut oil, which some women are intolerant to.
Or allergic to.
Yeah, or allergic to. Why, God, why they would actually have that in there. But anyway, Eutrogestin is an absolute game changer for many, 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 many women. It is this body identical progesterone. Some GPs will issue it, some don't. Now, the reason they don't tends to be because they don't know about it. Now, again, Davina McCall funded, like, yeah, I don't know if you know, but menopause training is optional for GPs. And Davina McCall highlighted this, and she has set up that work, the charity who are funding now training for GPs. And so we're trying to rectify that. So the ones who've never been trained on menopause don't even know it exists. And I believe it actually started out as part of a fertility treatment and then has ended up in HRT. And so a lot of them don't think that they can prescribe it. So this is where I think it's really important that we are empowering people to actually go and ask for what they want, because often, you know, it's a ripple effect. They go to the GP says, I can't do that. And, you know, I've coached them to just have the courage to say, ask them to just look on the listing, ask them to look on the listing. And then they say, could you look on the listing, please? And they go, oh, I didn't even know that was possible. And then they go, okay, yes, well, it's on the listing, so you can have it. And then the next woman who goes along, you know, this is going to how we start to change the world. So that's the progesterone. It contains soy and peanut oil, but it's made from yams. Okay, so the way that, and soy, but the way that it works, it just, when you look at it all biochemically, it looks more like our hormones. It's a lower risk than the others. Nothing is ever risk-free, but it is a much, much lower risk because our body can metabolize it. Our liver can clear it out much easier, and we're not going to get a build-up because it's more easily metabolized. Estradiol, which is not featured there, is actually a natural body identical estrogen, but it's often not prescribed. And it's also, you can't dose it because it's a patch. So a lot of women do very well instead with this estrogen pump gel. So it's a gel in a pump. And I quite like it because they can actually find the right dose for themselves. So in early perimenopause, women can do well on progesterone only due to those fluctuations in estrogen. But if you go to a GP, the GP will have to prescribe you progesterone and estrogen because there is this belief that they balance each other out. It's not necessarily true, especially when you don't need it. And so I found all this out working with specialists on Harley Street. You don't actually need it in that perimenopause phase, not until you start getting some of the estrogen symptoms. So that's why I like women getting the pump, because it might be that the doctor says, well, have 2 pumps a day. And I say, well, try 1 pump a day, see how you get on. As, oh, I still feel awful. Okay, well, give it a go without, see how you get on. So I really recommend that women actually do the research for themselves. Obviously, can't tell them to go against their GP, but very often if they do the research for themselves, they can actually find the right dose for them. I would never recommend to go over a dose. You never want that. What I do just want to say, though, about the Eutrogestin is if a woman has had a hysterectomy, the GP's flatline response on progesterone. That is actually not true. So what we know from the trials is if you don't have a womb, it won't thicken your womb. It's that simple. It will do all the calming work instead. I have got scores of clients who have gone through hysterectomies and who now are taking Eutrogestin because they found the right specialist who understands this and would prescribe it to them. So it's really frustrating that that is still the mainstream view, because it's not true. The other time They're very often, if there's been any cancer in the family or a woman's had breast cancer, there is just a flat line no, you're not having any hormone support. And I always say, ask them what the breast cancer was and if it was progesterone, because at least if it's very commonly breast cancer is estrogen, and rather than have nothing, at least if you could have progesterone. So go and ask them and just keep pushing back and keep asking for the right specialists until someone can actually give you an answer that makes sense to you. And that's always what it is for me. It's not about until you get the answer you want, it's until they say something that isn't just fobbing you off. And very often women can't have estrogen, and that's, you know, that's how it is, and I completely understand it. But yeah, I always say go push back if it's not progesterone. So body identical HRT was the slide before. Then we've got bioidentical HRTs. And so what's the difference? Nothing, except that body identical HRT is the word for the ones that the NHS sanction. It's the same stuff. It's just lower dose. And so it's still made from yams, etc. It's just very, very low dose. And so to give you an idea of that, the progesterone that I use in clinic is 1 drop is 4 milligrams. The minimum dose of the oestrogen is 100 milligrams. So we're talking about very low dose. So this is great for perimenopause, the 37-year-olds who, you know, maybe got a 2-year-old and are really starting to notice a loss in confidence. A drop of the progesterone can be a game changer, or a drop of pregnenolone can be a game changer for women. It's like, I call it putting the scaffolding around your body that's stressed. And just also FYI, pregnenolone is an absolute game changer for people who have had post-viral syndrome, because it's that bit in the adrenals where it's just supporting, because the adrenals aren't able to make it all, you're just supporting the body a little bit. So working with a practitioner who can work with the bioidenticals can be an absolute game changer. It's not strong enough for later. So as you start to go through menopause more, 2, 3, 4, 5 drops of progesterone, or the pro-adapters, it's called, that one I use, it's not enough. It's often not enough. I say that some women have really easy menopause, and that is enough, and that gets them through, and that's absolutely fine. But for women with really strong symptoms, they are probably going to get to a point where they're going to need the oestrogen. So with bioidentical hormones, so the doctors will issue estrogen, progesterone, and now it's starting to become common practice to issue testosterone, or that does bring with it a multitude of issues too, because if we're adrenally fatigued, it can knock us even further into that. But with bioidentical hormones, it's a full gamut of hormones except for testosterone. So pregnenolone, DHEA, estrogen, progesterone, and melatonin. And so these are available through practitioners like me who are supplement trained and not doctors, and like Laura. So bioidentical HRT bespoke. So what about the women like me where low dose isn't cutting it? Not going anywhere near the synthetics. I did try them, just FYI. I could never bring myself to bring the combined, to try do the combined pill, but I did do the Marina for a year and literally thought I was going mad. And then I was on the oestrogen and the pump, and it just with my gut and my intolerances, I just couldn't process it. And so I was going, okay, this isn't enough. This isn't touching the sides. And it was this conversation at the gym where someone said, well, I just go and see this doctor on Harley Street. And I went, what, isn't that just more of the same? So there are some Harley Street specialists who work with high dose bioidenticals. These doctors also offer testosterone, DHA, pregnenolone, progesterone, estrogen, melatonin, all of them. And what happens is they'll do a blood test, they work out where you are in what you need, and then these are blended specifically to you. They are amazingly effective. So these ones here are lozenges, and you literally let them dissolve in your mouth, and they are unbelievably effective. But they are incredibly expensive, and so that is a real block for some women. And so I do say to my clients and I like to know that there's a pathway. And so when I get a woman where I'm like, okay, so this is the pathway, and a lot of women aren't tolerating hormones. We're doing a lot of gut work. I like to do all of those foundations first before I send them off to Harley Street, because basically practitioners like me much cheaper than a functional medical practitioner. So you can reduce it from being multiples of thousands for all the tests that a doctor would want down to maybe a couple of thousand. And then the hormones themselves usually work out about £100 a month. But in the first, whilst you're getting used to what you need, it can be up to £400 a month whilst they're trying different levels and making sure that you're okay with them. So it is really expensive. So I do say to people, you're going to have to budget for a good few £1,000s, and let's do all the gut work and everything that you could possibly need to do before you go there, so that your foundations are in place and you're not paying for that. So I just want to talk about other specialists, because there are a lot of other very famous doctors now who offer specialist services, and a lot of them on TV. Unless they are working with bioidenticals or working with a different solution, they are basically trained the same way as the GPs. So what they will be offering is the same as the medical model. Now, my experience of those doctors is when they can't get a woman feeling right, they just go in with estrogen, more estrogen, more estrogen, more estrogen, more estrogen. And I've had women on 6 to 8 pumps a day of estrogen. 2 pumps a day would be kind of normal. So that they're going up and up with estrogen. And as we've already said earlier, estrogen dominance is a really big issue. And if women aren't processing their hormones, just going in with more and more and more and more and more, it actually causes more problems. And then when they run out of ideas, they're kind of stumped because they're not doing gut clearing and stuff.
I also think it's really important to get those foundations in place, because if you don't, then this doesn't always work. So then they're incredibly expensive, and it doesn't work. So it is important to do that piece
100%,
first.
yeah, 100%. So herbal HRT. So for women who really don't want to go anywhere near actual HRT, then we can start to look at herbal options. So maca and soy. So maca is a root. It's disgusting, but it tastes disgusting, but it is really, really effective at stopping hot flushes in the perimenopause phase. It can actually make things worse in sort of postmenopause. Do you quite like it?
Yeah, I think it tastes like pudding.
Oh no, literally what's very gag, but it's really effective. And for women in the early perimenopause, 3 teaspoons of, it's called gelatinized maca, for 3 weeks. So 3 teaspoons a day for 3 weeks, absolute game changer for hot flushes. I was shocked when it worked. I don't know why, because I do herbal stuff all the time, but I was like, it's never going to work. I was literally dripping. This is never going to work. Oh, it kind of worked. But there will come a point where it stops working. That's kind of the problem with it. Soy, as much as I'm not a big fan of soy for a variety of reasons, actually soy is phenomenal. And especially sometimes I get women through a whole menopause just on a couple of drops of a bioidentical with soy. Some women don't want the bioidenticals, so they just have more soy. Evening primrose oil. So this is why we shouldn't be feeding soy to teens as well. Like, it's going to really mess up your estrogen receptors, like massively mess it up. Evening primrose oil is also estrogenic. Chaste tree, as Laura was saying earlier, it's actually a way of boosting progesterone. So we've got the top 3 are estrogen, and then you've got chaste tree. And shatavari is a really wonderful adaptogenic herb for menopause, which can be an absolute game changer for some people for night sweats. This is much safer, but it just doesn't work for everybody. I think and also we've got there's the old fashioned things like, what was it called? Black cohosh. Some people swear by it. Then I think basically the women who have really robust adrenal glands and haven't ruined them partying hard in the 90s, that they're the ones who actually, where this approach and things like black cohosh are going to work. So the reason why HRT is often not working, because I get women I'm doing everything that Davina said, and Davina McCall's program, they're very into the Utrogestan and the estradiol pump. And women come and go, I'm doing that, and I've read your blog and I'm doing it. And I, okay, come on, have a look. Then you find out that they are intolerant to soy or peanut oil. If they're xenoestrogen overloaded, so we become xenoestrogen overloaded from unfiltered tap water, because everybody's on the pill, however many millions of people, and they're weeing it out, or HRT, and they're weeing it out into our water supply, and it doesn't actually get taken out in the processing. So we end up with this estrogenic overload in our body. That also comes from the outgassing from toxic chemicals from carpets, from flat pack furniture, although footnote, IKEA did get rid of all the parabens that caused that. Well, it's around 2015, wasn't it? From cleaning products, from pesticides, from toiletries. Like, there's a big thing, we talk about it a lot, because one woman in one day can actually be exposed to over 500 chemicals once she's actually done her beauty regime and cleaned the house. Synthetic progestins will also be really messing up your body. Incorrect diet, so it will massively affect your gut microbiome. You will not be able to absorb your HRT. Your liver will be going into overwhelm. An impaired metabolism, poor digestion, as we said, and high stress. These are all reasons why your HRT won't work. So what do we do about it? We detox the gut, we detox the liver, we get on a hormone balancing diet, we eliminate food intolerances. We could not bang on about that enough. We reduce stress. And you know, one of my favorite things, having worked with many, many, many people who have been diagnosed with a terminal condition, is they say, it is amazing what I don't care about that I thought was so important pre-diagnosis. And that is an analogy I give to my clients all the time, because we can get so caught up in the glorification of being busy. Actually, if we take our ego away from being needed, being wanted, being validated, our guilt, our sense of duty, if we take all of that away, what can we let go of? Because the picture, if we don't, isn't good. It's just not good. So reducing stress, and then finding the right HRT. So staged approach to menopause. This is the pathway that we work with. So diet and lifestyle changes, including our symptom assessor. So where are you on the symptom assessor? And if you don't know what a symptom assessor is, go to Balance Wellness. Yeah.
Yeah, or you can go to symptomassessor.co.uk.
Oh, symptomassessor.co.uk.
It's a little questionnaire that gives you advice about how to change your diet and lifestyle.
And where you are on this triangle. Is it blood sugars you need to work on? Is it stress hormones? Is it those sex hormones? Find a wellness practitioner or kinesiologist for tailored advice, and where necessary, low dose bioidenticals. When you're ready, if you want to, you can go to the GP and request body identical prescriptions. And so it takes some women's quite a while to get to the point. I get a lot of women coming who have been prescribed it, but we've got to do all this work on their gut first and get their diet. They're not absorbing it. So we have to do that bit before they can even get to the point of taking their Eutrogestin. And then for women where that's not going to work, I refer them on to a functional doctor for the blood tests and those bespoke hormones, if that's a pathway that they can go down and want to go down.
Oops. You see it?
So yeah, like I said all the way through this, I truly believe that our job as coaches is to share the education around what women can do, shed light on the importance of diet and lifestyle, because we all kind of go, yeah, diet and lifestyle are really important, but we don't. It is so impactive. It's so impactive. It's unreal. And then equipping women to have empowered conversations with the doctors to get what it is that they actually want.
That's it.